It's your boy King Crowder back again with another edition of History You May Not Know and Things That Are Not Taught in Detail for Sure. Today's lesson, I'm giving you an uncut gem on Dr. Randy Bunche. Dr. Bunche was born in Detroit, Michigan in 1904. He was baptized in the Second Baptist Church when Dr. Bunche was a child. After he was born, his family relocated to Toledo, Ohio, where his father went there to look for work. However, his father had difficulty finding work, so his family moved back to Detroit in 1909 when his baby sister, Grace, was born. With the help of the mother's side of the family, Johnson and them moved back and had a comfortable living, and their father tried to stay near to provide, even though mass segregation and different things were going on at the time. Because his mother's health would continue to fail, his family then relocated to Albuquerque, New Mexico. While in Albuquerque, New Mexico, his mother, who was musically inclined, contributed a lot, and had a very bubbling personality, tragically died in 1917. After his mother passed away, Bunche, being a teenager at this time, his grandmother and them decided to move to South Central LA in California. You must understand, he had a lot of siblings at the time and his grandmother was relocated. When he was in high school in South Central LA, he was a brilliant student, debater, athlete, and was the valedictorian of Jefferson High School. After he graduated from Jefferson High School in LA, he attended UCLA, graduating summa cum laude and pledging Phi Beta Kappa in 1927. He was a valedictorian of his class. After his graduation from his undergrad, he used his money to raise his studies and decided to go do his graduate studies at Harvard University. He earned his PhD, his doctorate in political science. After graduating, he continued to earn another degree, a master's degree in political science, and also earned another degree from Howard University, an already historically black college. While teaching at Howard, he began to teach outside the university. He was the first African American to gain a degree from an American university at this time. In 1934, you must understand, he wrote his dissertation on the French admiration policy and the conflict going on at the time. While studying at this conflict in 1936 to 1938, Dr. Bunche started to study anthropology and understood psychological research at University of Northwestern in Evanston, Illinois. He also began to do research in South Africa and London. He published his first view on world race relations in 1936. He mentioned that the whole reality of race being a social construct when he was immediately had issues with his employers. He began to speak down how race had gone through prejudicial lines that affected many people of color from an economic, social, and a political perspective. Dr. Bunche began to speak on landmark racial decisions about the Negro problem in modern societies. For more than 2 decades, he served as the main chair at Howard University, while teaching his integrated race relations from a humanistic and a global perspective. He spoke on international relationships. He also was a member of the board of the American Philosophy Society in 1950. He was one of the main members that was pushing for internal peace. A lot of people do not realize that Dr. Bunche's main priorities came about because he was the main one preaching to end colonialism. Most people do not realize that he ended and spoke against colonialism in Africa, specifically Nigeria and the western parts, also the Caribbean. His work led to most people understanding that these people will never become self-sufficient on their own if the colonial powers of the Brits or the English continue to hurt the Caribbean and African continents. Dr. Bunche single-handedly led to an innovation change in the way he spoke and also with his research. He single-handedly pushed for colonialism to leave these parts of the continent and has not been highlighted how much his leadership has worked to benefit. Along with other great works, he was the architect to having the United Nations speaking on black issues, specifically in America. Dr. Bunche was a huge component for the Black Liberation Movement pre the UN days, pre the UN really forming, he spoke heavily against colonialism, racial barriers, racial conflict, and racism that affected the globe. Dr. Bunche was a huge supporter of Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement, even though it was a barrier at the time preventing him from go there because he was doing to the Israeli conflict going on overseas. He attended Martin Luther King's march in 1963, the March on Washington. He was in the crowd on the I Have a Dream speech. He was there when the landmark voters registration of the 1965 Act was approved. Dr. Bunche preached, sought, and said how much these civil rights law and legislation need to happen. While he was working, doing all these things in America, he earned the Nobel Peace Prize for what he did to have conflict resolution skills being in the Syrian conflict. He was a master in de-escalation. He was using his skills, his language, his nationality, and his effects to work with people that having a religious conflict in an area. People do not realize how the height of that conflict was going, but Dr. Bunche's skills was the main one that allowed the Americas to prevent a massive war from infighting. Dr. Bunche worked hand in hand with the leaders in that area, portraying how the solution base will not help them from an economic but a social standpoint. Dr. Bunche later on in his life resided in Queens. People do not know that President Harry Truman and JFK wanted to honor this man by giving him appointments, but he refused to do so because Jim Crow's laws were still affecting people in D.C. and all over the American South. He was a man of principle, honor, and legacy. Dr. Bunche literally taught until he died. His greatest piece of legacy, somebody understand, is he's the first Black American to ever receive and earn the Nobel Peace Prize. He was also the first Black American to single-handedly own negotiations that was going on in the Middle Eastern conflict. Dr. Bunche made his children, who were all college educated, who were all founding members, overachieve and overproduce. This gentleman overexceeded every life expectancy, being someone that grew up with extreme prejudice and racism all his life. Dr. Bunche must be celebrated, his legacy must be amplified, and what he did must be discussed. Dr. Bunche's sunset clearly went down on December 9th, 1971. He passed away due to heart complications, but his legacy will forever live on. He is currently buried in the Bronx, New York City, but this gentleman and what he did needs to be talked about. Remember, he was the first one to earn the Nobel Peace Prize in 1950 at the heart of Jim Crow and racism. His work with the UN and the Palestine conflict is undertold. His optimistic de-escalation strategy, his push to end colonialism, civil war acts, and overcoming issues is why this guy is truly one of the gods of this country. Dr. Ralph Bunche should be talked about, should be discussed, and should be taught. He was the rose that grew from concrete. He was a leader, innovator, and way ahead of his time. It's your boy King Crowder, checking back out again with another historical lesson of a figure that we all should know. Please comment, like, and subscribe to the channel. And I hope, for the main part, that you learned something. Peace.